So today we're going to be talking a little bit more about GCSE and A-level exam technique. Now, it's been a while since I filmed a video because I too have been sitting my exams, and a big part of that has been learning how to do closed book exams after a while. Naturally, that means that I've had to hone my exam technique a little bit more, which has been tiring to say the least, but it is really helpful and it's a useful thing to learn how to do. And it's also really good because it's something that you can implement the day of your exam. So if you're watching this video and you've got GCSEs or A-levels coming up, hopefully these 3 tips are going to be something that you can implement pretty much as soon as possible. Let's get into the video. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you don't know who I am, my name is Akshi. I'm a second year medical student at Imperial College London, and I have just finished sitting my exams, which went meh. So we'll see what happens really. Nothing I can do right now to rescue them or to save them from whatever happened. But I thought, if anything, I can pass on what I've learned regarding exam technique to you guys. So if you guys have got exams coming up, you can carry some of that tips with you into the exam and hopefully get good scores, or scores to what you want. We're going to be splitting this video up also into 3 parts. So we'll talk about reading the question in the first bit, we'll talk about time management, and then we'll talk about answering the question. So those are 3 very big parts to an exam, and hopefully they'll help you. So starting off, you have to understand what the GCSEs are, or A-levels, and these exams essentially rely on you being able to read the question. A large part of success in these exams comes from understanding what a question is asking you to do, whether it's describe, analyze, explain. These are all vastly different commands, and your teacher will have given you lists of these command words, and I'd recommend pulling up one of these lists and learning them because they are really helpful. In these public exams, a lot of what you are asked to do is based around these describe words. So, for example, describe is asking you to simply describe something, so list essentially what is going on, not to go into any scientific explanations, but just to describe the basic events that are happening. In a question that asks you to explain or analyze, so analyze will normally be in a mathematical context, it'll ask you to analyze a graph. And that is asking you to describe a graph, so what's going on, and to also say why that's happening. So if a graph has a positive correlation, why do you think the positive correlation exists? And for explain, they'll probably ask you to explain something. Again, it's pretty similar. It's asking you to explain, give the scientific explanation behind a description. So if they're asking you to explain mitosis, they're asking you to describe the events that happen, but also explain why each event happens, and why particular things go wrong, why particular things are important. So these command words are really important, and if there's one tip I could give you, it's to whip out these command words, learn them, and understand them. And in the exam, whenever you see these questions, circle the command word, understand which one it's asking you to do, and then write the answer, because by that chance you'll get many more marks than just randomly writing an answer down. And that's the first tip I'd say. Now, moving on, it brings us quite nicely onto time management. Time management is also something else you can do before the exam and implement during the exam. I'd recommend that you have a look at your exam, see how many marks it is, see how much time you've got for it, and then whilst you do that, split this up. Let's say you've got a 60-mark exam and you've got half now to do it in. That gives you 2 marks per minute. Now that is correct, but it also is risky because some marks are naturally going to take longer than others, and if you don't leave yourself any time at the end, you're probably going to run out of time. So what I always say to do is take 5 minutes off at least, then calculate how much time you should be spending. So maybe spend 2 marks every 50 seconds, or a mark every 20 seconds or 25 seconds. That way you might be a little bit pressured, but if you skip questions, that's okay, because you've got a little bit of time at the end where you can come back. And also, if you're unsure on questions, there's no pressure right there and then to go over it again and again, because you can just come back to it at the end of the exam and re-look it then. Now, this is really good, especially if you've got time before your exam, because you can do past papers, and I'd recommend you do this technique. However, even if it's the morning of your exam and you're listening to this, I would still recommend to do this because it's really helpful. Stick to this timing as rigidly as possible, because that way you'll have a load of time at the end, and you can come back to the exam paper and review it, having done all the questions with a new mindset. Once you're in the rhythm of the exam, you'll also find that you're thinking a little bit more clearly, so you can have a go at the question again, and it's just such a good technique to use, and I'd really recommend you use it. So if there's one thing I would recommend you do with timing, is to take 5 minutes off at the end and then calculate how much time you got per mark. And the final thing I'd recommend is to think about how you're answering questions. Now, in science papers, language is really important, so you need to be able to use scientific language. What I mean by that is not saying you have a certain amount of carbon dioxide, but to say you have a certain volume of carbon dioxide, or a certain volume of water, or volume of orange juice, whatever it is, scientific language is super, super, super important to use. And if you're able to use scientific language effectively, you'll be able to access a lot of marks that people are missing out on. Believe it or not, mark schemes sometimes even say reject it if the candidate uses this word. So maybe it's useful to look over the mark scheme if you don't understand what I mean by language, and have a look at which words they really don't like, and avoid those and find the scientific equivalents of those to use in the exam. These 3 tips are really helpful, especially if you combine these with a pretty good base of revision. They can just get you those extra marks and maybe leave you a little bit more calm during the exam as opposed to rushing through things and, going through things without a care of what you're actually writing down. It's really easy to lose silly marks in exams, and it's really annoying because most people actually are only a mark or 2 away from their preferred grade when they miss it. So these tips can get you those extra marks that you really shouldn't be missing out on because you've done the revision for. So hopefully they help. I'll put timestamps down below to each of the different tips so you can go through and skim to each one if you want. If you've got any questions about particular tips that I mentioned or anything else about the exams, do let me know. You've all done definitely, enough work leading up to these exams, so don't stress, don't panic, relax, take deep breaths in, just calm down, and you'll all be fine. You'll all be okay, and we'll all be able to smile about this after exams are finished, hopefully. So yeah, and remember, everyone else is obviously in the same boat as you guys are, so don't worry yourselves. So yeah, hopefully these tips helped, and like always, I will catch you all in the next video. Okay, so I'm on the 11th floor, and I'm here for a patient simulated interview, so it's where we practice how we talk to patients with an actor. And how exactly did you manage your time at A-levels? I don't think I really did, which probably sounds